It started with a voice so sharp it could cut through stone. A voice that didn't belong in the wilderness, where silence and the rustling of pines were the natural music of the valley. But that morning the peace was broken. "You can't be here," she screamed, her voice bouncing off the ridges. The woman, known around town as Karen, stood with her phone raised like a weapon. I watched her from my cabin porch, her face twisted in outrage, her body trembling with the fury of someone who thought the world existed only to obey her. She believed she had caught me trespassing, an intruder living on land that didn't belong to me. Her voice grew louder as she barked into her phone. "Yes, officer, there's a man here. He's squatting in a cabin that isn't authorized. You need to come right away." Her finger jabbed toward me as if her accusation alone could chain me in place. But while she unleashed her anger, she had no clue that this game she was playing was one she could never win. Because this wasn't just my cabin, it was my valley. Every river bend, every clearing, every trail leading through the woods. She thought she was queen of the HOA kingdom, but the truth she hadn't yet discovered was that she was standing on my land, challenging the man who owned it all. The power of entitlement is a strange thing. It makes people blind, makes them reckless. Karen strutted around like she carried authority carved into stone tablets, like her HOA bylaws were stronger than county deeds and centuries-old land rights. That was her world, a place where neighbors trembled at the sight of her clipboard, where she fined people for paint colors and patio furniture. But this cabin was no cookie-cutter house sitting inside her gates. It was built before the HOA ever existed, a fortress of independence. It stood here long before her subdivision scarred the valley with asphalt and fences. Still she couldn't accept it. In her eyes, everything within sight belonged to her domain. And when belief collides with truth, there's always an explosion. The kind that shakes the ground. I remember the first time she marched down my dirt path, chin high, sunglasses gleaming, that smug certainty written across her face. She wasn't curious. She wasn't cautious. She was ready for confrontation. "This structure violates HOA regulations," she snapped. "You'll need to vacate immediately." Her words carried the arrogance of a judge, jury, and executioner rolled into one. I said nothing at first. I just studied her. Because people like Karen? They don't come to listen. They come to dominate. And if you interrupt their show too early, you ruin the spectacle. I let her rant, let her list all the imaginary codes and violations she believed I was guilty of. And when she finally paused, waiting for me to shrink back in shame, I simply smiled. That smile was enough to enrage her further. Because in her world, resistance was an act of war. The moment she called the cops, her desperation revealed itself. She needed backup. She needed flashing lights and badges to give her authority weight. But the way she described me, trespasser, squatter, criminal, wasn't just exaggeration. It was venom. She wanted me humiliated, dragged away in front of her neighbors, proof to everyone that her power stretched beyond HOA gates. Yet as she paced, waiting, I felt nothing but calm. What? Because I held the ace card. Ownership. And ownership is a weapon stronger than any HOA threat. The gravel crunched under tires as the patrol car pulled into the clearing. Karen straightened, her smirk wide, her confidence renewed. She waved them over like a queen greeting her knights. "Over here." "That's him," she shouted, pointing at me like I was a wanted fugitive. The officer stepped out, one cautious, the other already weary of the drama he was about to wade into. Karen launched into her tirade before they could even ask a question. "He doesn't belong here. This cabin is unauthorized. He's breaking every HOA rule in the book." Her voice rose higher and higher, fueled by the belief that she was untouchable now that the law had arrived. But authority doesn't bend to screams. Authority bends to facts. I stepped forward, calm, collected. My voice cut through her chaos like a blade through fog. "Officers, I believe there's been a misunderstanding." That single word, misunderstanding, sent her into a frenzy. She screamed louder, insisting there was no misunderstanding, insisting I was a liar. But the officers motioned for her to quiet down. Their eyes turned to me, waiting. And that's when I handed over the folder I always kept close. Copies of the deeds, maps of the valley, documents dating back decades. They flipped through the pages, their expressions shifting slowly from suspicion, to confusion, to realization. The silence stretched. Karen's smirk began to waver. She tried to speak, but the officer lifted a hand to stop her. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "this isn't HOA property. In fact," he paused, scanning the documents again. "In fact, according to these records, this entire valley, including the land your neighborhood sits on, is owned by him. It was as if the earth itself had opened beneath her feet. Karen's confidence collapsed in an instant. Her face drained of color. She stammered, her words tangled in disbelief. She searched for an escape, a loophole, any shred of control to cling to. But there was none. Her HOA rules meant nothing here. The ground she thought she ruled was never hers to begin with. And in that moment, as the truth echoed between us, the balance of power shifted forever. But this wasn't the end. No. This was only the beginning. Because people like Karen? They don't surrender. They don't walk away. They double down. They twist, they fight, they claw to keep the illusion alive. And what she did next proved that when entitlement is cornered, it doesn't vanish. It transforms into something far more dangerous. The aftermath of that moment was almost surreal. Karen stumbled back, her hands gripping the air as if she could snatch authority out of thin space. The officers, now fully aware of the situation, exchanged glances. One of them muttered something under his breath, a quiet acknowledgement that yes, the paperwork left no doubt, I owned the valley. And yet Karen didn't retreat. Her pride, her ego, her very identity was wrapped up in this battle. Every fiber of her being screamed at her not to back down. She started pacing in a tight circle, muttering to herself, scanning the trees, the cabin, the river beyond. Her eyes darted like a trapped animal's. And in her desperation she made a crucial mistake. She underestimated how calm, how unshakable I could remain. I didn't move. I didn't yell. I didn't wave the deeds again because the truth had already done its work. Karen, in her fury, started lashing out verbally, hurling threats that had no power, recounting imaginary HOA rules, citing regulations that applied only within her subdivision. But here, under the towering pines and above the flowing river, her words were hollow. Every insult, every decree, every attempt to assert dominance fell flat against the sheer fact of ownership. And as the minutes stretched, her frustration grew visibly. She began pacing wider, raising her voice higher, as if volume could replace legitimacy. That's when I realized something. She was no longer in control, but she also couldn't stop herself. The more she flailed, the more entertaining the unfolding scene became, not just for me but for anyone who might have witnessed it. Her humiliation was palpable and it was inevitable. And then came the callous move that truly revealed her character. Karen pulled her phone from her pocket again, insisting she call the HOA board to report this trespasser. She thought she could summon authority from afar, that a few signatures and bylaws would force me to comply. But I had anticipated this. I had always known she would try to escalate. And so, with a quiet voice, I let her know, you can call whoever you want. But the documents are clear. You are standing on private property. All of it. Every inch. The cabin, the land, the road, the river, it's all mine. You have no right here. The pause that followed was delicious. She froze mid-dial, realization finally creeping into her mind. There was no backing out. She had no allies here, only a valley that belonged to someone else. And yet, stubbornness isn't easily defeated. Karen's ego forced her to continue, to keep fighting an unwinnable battle. The officers, having reviewed the deeds and verified the claims, finally spoke with authority. Ma'am, one said, his tone firm but neutral, you are mistaken. This man owns the property in question. Your HOA has no jurisdiction here. Karen's eyes narrowed, her jaw tight, her body rigid with disbelief. She was the embodiment of cognitive dissonance, unable to reconcile the reality before her with the narrative she had lived by for years. And in that moment, the valley seemed to hold its breath. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying the subtle sounds of birds and water, as if the wilderness itself was watching justice unfold. She didn't stop there, of course. Karen attempted a series of verbal attacks, questioning my right to be here, insinuating that perhaps the paperwork was forged, that the county records could be wrong. But each attempt only highlighted her ignorance. The officers, now fully informed, simply shook their heads and asked her to leave. But pride doesn't vanish with instructions. Karen lingered, muttering under her breath, pacing back and forth as if sheer frustration could rewrite reality. And while she raged, I finally stepped down from the cabin porch and walked toward the river, letting the sunlight and wind remind me that control wasn't given, it was claimed and defended. From that day forward, the valley was no longer a place of solitude alone. It became a stage, a testament to the power of preparation, knowledge, and calm authority. Karen's attempts to assert dominance became legendary among locals, stories whispered in backyards at HOA meetings and in cafes. They spoke of the woman who believed she could bully an entire valley into submission, only to discover that her power was an illusion, fragile as glass. And in every retelling the lesson was clear. Knowledge and ownership, when wielded correctly, are shields stronger than anger, louder than accusations and more enduring than fear. But the drama didn't end with her retreat. Entitlement, when cornered, doesn't die, it mutates. Karen began trying smaller tactics, subtle attacks designed to undermine me. Letters claiming violations, anonymous tips, rumors spread among neighbors. She assumed that if she couldn't win with law enforcement, she could win socially. But her credibility was already shattered. Every attempt she made to manipulate the narrative backfired, her own actions betraying her. It became almost entertaining to watch, each failed attempt a reinforcement of one simple truth. No amount of force, no stack of papers, and no self-righteous indignation could override rightful ownership and calm, strategic response. And as the weeks passed, the valley remained mine. The river flowed, the pines swayed, and the cabin stood untouched by her interference. Karen, meanwhile, became a cautionary tale, a reminder of what happens when entitlement meets reality. The story spread, inspiring those who had felt bullied by HOA overreach or neighborly power plays. They saw that preparation, knowledge, and steadfastness could level the playing field, that one person could assert control without aggression, simply by knowing the truth and standing firm. Time passed, but Karen didn't give up entirely. She became quieter, less bold, but still present, lurking at the edges of her own illusions. And I watched her, not with malice, but with the understanding that entitlement is a force to be respected, even if ultimately powerless. Because it can persist, it can linger, and it can attempt to strike again. But in this valley she had learned the hard way. The real authority belongs to those who hold the truth, and the courage to defend it, no matter how loud or aggressive the opposition may become. By the time she finally retreated from the valley completely, the lesson had already been absorbed. Ownership is not just about papers and signatures. It's about presence, awareness, and unwavering resolve. And as I walked the trails of the valley, sunlight reflecting off the river, the silence felt sweeter than ever. The freedom, the control, the peace, all mine, secured not through aggression, but through knowledge and calm mastery of the facts. Karen's calls, her threats, her wild accusations. They became echoes, fading into memory, reminders of a battle fought not with rage, but with intelligence, patience, and strategic courage. And every time someone asked about that infamous day, the story was retold with a subtle, quiet emphasis. In life, it is not the loudest voice that wins, but the one prepared, the one grounded in truth, and the one who can remain calm while others scream. Karen never forgot the valley, nor did the story fade among neighbors. She became a symbol, a cautionary tale about the limits of HOA authority and the danger of unchecked entitlement. The valley, meanwhile, remained a testament to what preparation, calmness, and knowledge can achieve. Every tree, every river bend, every inch of the land served as a reminder that ownership is not given lightly, nor lost easily. It must be defended thoughtfully with intelligence and strategy. In the years that followed, her attempts to regain control diminished. The board members who had once backed her saw the futility of trying to challenge someone who had legal authority over what they claimed to oversee. Rumors of fines, threats, and inspections vanished. The valley was mine, and the lesson of that day echoed through every conversation and every glance exchanged at HOA meetings and local gatherings. And while Karen might have tried to control the narrative, the valley spoke for itself. Anyone who stepped into its trails could see the truth in the quiet majesty of the land. This was my territory, my cabin, my sanctuary. And no amount of entitlement, no HOA rule, and no wild accusation could change that. The valley remained a monument to calm, calculated authority, a silent victory over arrogance, and a lesson for anyone who believed power could be wielded without responsibility, knowledge, and respect. The story of Karen's misjudgment spread far and wide, not as a tale of conflict, but as a blueprint for standing firm, claiming what is rightfully yours, and remaining unshakable in the face of outrage. Because in the end, entitlement may roar, threats may fly, but truth, preparation, and patience will always prevail. If you want to see every outrageous HOA showdown, uncover the truth behind entitlement, and watch justice unfold in the wildest battles over property, hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and join the war zone before the next Karen shows up.